Welcome to an amazing episode of Talking Impact. Today we have Jody Carrington, a psychologist, a podcaster, speaker, best-selling author, mom of three. You may have heard of her, best-selling book multiple times over. Today we talk about connection, how the mental health crisis at the root of it really is an epidemic in loneliness and a disconnection issue that we have from the ground up everywhere we go, and how we need to rest. We need to be engaging, not focus on knowing it all and doing it all and all these big things that we're chasing after. But the thing that we need to focus most of our time on is what's right in front of us, who's right in front of us, how connected we are to that next person, that next kid, that next opportunity to show our gifts, show our strengths. Because it's only by doing that that we ever get to those big, hairy, audacious goals. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Talking Impact, your go-to podcast for exploring the powerful connection between mental health, education, and resilient youth. Join us as we uncover insights and stories that inspire classrooms, stronger minds, brighter futures, and a lasting impact in our society. Well, welcome to the show, Talking Impact. Really honored to have you on this episode, and I feel like you're one of the most aligned guests that we've had recently. Not that any of them aren't aligned, but the work you do is just right in line with what we do at Impact Society. The books you've written, your podcast. Are you up to 1 million almost viewers now, and our listeners?
Yeah, we're getting close.
Congratulations! That's amazing. It just shows that the work you do, who you are, the authenticity you bring, but also what you're talking about is something that is there's a craving around in our society, and not just across Canada, but to figure out what's going on and how can we address it in the most simple, straightforward ways.
Yeah, 100%. And it surprises me all the time. Like the message, you know, what you speak about, and certainly what I talk about is, it's not complicated. It's not hard. It's just truth. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm loving it, and it's just going great guns.
Yeah. Well, the world needs more heroes, and you're definitely one of those people out there leading the charge and helping us get back to connection and using that as the opportunity to not just prevent the mental health crisis or get ahead of the curve of the mental health crisis, but to help young people flourish, help families flourish, help communities thrive. So a lot of excitement for me, a little fanboy moment, I guess, just to be talking to you right now. But for those of you who aren't fanboys or fangirls or fan people listening right now, bring us up to speed. Tell us who's Jody Carrington and what's been your journey and what makes you, what makes you feel strong, and what do you love to do? What are you passionate about?
Oh my gosh. Just start with the easy stuff. Hey, okay.
Yeah, dive right in.
So I'm an Alberta girl. So I grew up in a little town called Viking, Alberta, Canada. And I often tell the story about how, I can tell you the first and last name of every teacher I had. I can tell you my bus driver's name was Stan Chomick, a crotchety old son of a bitch, and he picked us up every day from grade 3, dropped us home every night to grade 12, and I loved this guy.
Yeah.
My custodian's name was Mrs. Sheets. And I go on to get a PhD out of this little town, but I cannot tell you a single piece of literacy or numeracy that I learned in those classrooms. But I can tell you where my favorite teacher was standing and what she was wearing the day she had to tell us that then captain of our hockey team had been killed. And I remember thinking as a 16-year-old kid, if there's somebody at the helm of big emotion, when everything feels unsafe or unpredictable, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so that started the journey for me, as I reflect back on it now I said to my dad, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be like Mrs. Nordstrom. And he, at the time in small town Alberta, you might appreciate this, all I was doing was drinking excessively in the gravel pits looking for a husband because that's what you do in small town Alberta. And so he was so excited to he was like, yeah, you want to be a teacher? And I was like, no, I don't like kids. And because I still don't really, I have 3 of my own. So I'm kind of coming around.
It's enough, right?
I'm a much bigger fan of big people.
Yeah.
And so it started this sort of quest to become a psychologist. And I ended up at the U of A, and I took a couple of years as a civilian member for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And I started to really understand what it looks like when organizations don't look after their people, and what happens when you experience significant amounts of trauma, and how that really interplays into everything. Like there's no such thing as work-life balance when you serve other humans. And so I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to figure out trauma and the world of policing. And so I was going to change the RCMP. It was a small goal. And And then I did my residency in Nova Scotia, and they said, you have to do a rotation with kids. And I was like, listen, not a fan. And they said, you're kind of like when we think you'd be a good fit. So I fell in love with the tiny humans, and I became sort of enamored with this idea of the neurophysiology behind attachment and development, and how trauma messes that all up. And so I did a bit of a postdoc in Nova Scotia, and then I came back to Alberta and took my first job on a locked psychiatric inpatient unit for kids at the Alberta Children's Hospital in your hometown there, Calgary. And man, those kids and families taught me so much. They taught me, most importantly, that I was trained to ask the question, what is wrong? And I would ask that question all the time. What is wrong with this one? What is wrong with this one? And they taught me very quickly that you had to ask the question, what happened to this one?
What's the story?
And when you ask that question, it evokes in us humans this thing called empathy. And so now, fast forward 20 years, I had a private practice, and I started speaking, mostly consultation to schools and hockey teams is how this started. And it just sort of grew from there. And then I wrote a book. It became a national bestseller. And then we got a deal with HarperCollins, and we wrote a bigger book. And now we're on to the fourth book, and I speak globally 100 times a year and have a podcast. And really the message is core, as you said, aligned with everything that you talk about, which is, if the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. And we were never meant to do any of this alone. And we've never in the history of the free world been more disconnected than we are in this moment.
So many questions, and I'd love to dive into what's at the root of that disconnection, but at the same time, well, actually, let's go there. What happened? How did we get to a place where we're more disconnected than we've ever been?
It's quite simple. So for the first time in history, we're dying faster from emotional illness than from physical illness. Okay, so we've never had this much access to resources and research, but levels of anxiety, depression, ADHD. It seems like everybody got the autism. Like, people ask me this all the time, like, what is going on with this mental health crisis? And I actually don't think we're in a mental health crisis. I think we're in an understandable human response to a loneliness epidemic. It is estimated that our great-grandparents looked at their children 72% more of the time than we look at our babies today. And what's interesting about the human race, and I talk about this quite often lately because I think it's so interesting, and I just kind of made this shit up, but I think there's two rules to this human race. Whoever made us, it doesn't matter to me what you believe in, Jesus or Buddha or Yahweh or the Great Big Bang, however we got here, doesn't matter. Yeah. In this human race, we all are way more alike than we are different. We come into this world exactly the same way. Okay, race is a social construct. So our DNA as humans around this globe in this moment is 99.98% the same. Okay. Yeah. We all leave in exactly the same way. Okay. So while we're here, there's two rules. Number one, whoever made us said, I'm going to make you neurobiologically wired for connection. If you disconnect from an infant, they die. You will do better in this human experience if you are good at connection. It will keep you alive, but it will also keep you healthy. And it's so interesting to me because, like, if you disconnect from an infant, they die. But the only AI that we're talking about in this current generation, right, is everything but that. And so I say to schools, I say to hockey coaches, I say to Fortune 500 companies, if you want to be more successful in this season than anybody else, it's really quite easy because you'll understand that the only AI that matters is authentic interaction. That is the number one rule of being human, is authentic interaction. So that's the first rule of the human race. I'm going to make you neurobiologically wired for connection. The second rule was a curveball. Whoever made us said, despite the fact that you're neurobiologically wired for connection, the hardest thing you will ever do is look at each other. Yeah. And that's kind of shitty because we've never had so many opportunities to look away. So we just started this talk. I think we were off air when I said to you, how come we're doing this? We're 45 minutes away from each other right now. How come we are online? And you're like, can't you still connect online? Yes, but the neurophysiological changes that would happen if I was in your office in this moment, we cannot possibly replicate here.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
And so I would read your body language. I would feel your neurochemistry. You would feel mine. None of those things will be able to AI, right? And I have so many more opportunities to look away. You can't, this is the problem, right? Yeah. So this is right here. And I've got notifications. Everybody that I love, everybody you love is connected into this little box. I'm showing you, maybe this
I'm
is
on airplane mode, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's showing her phone if you're listening.
I'm showing the phone. And most of us have an Apple Watch. So in order to do interviews these days, I take off my Apple Watch because everybody I love is connected to that. And everybody I don't like, actually, like Team Snap bitches and everybody on the planet has access to me 24 hours a day. So I'm not that good to stay connected to you. Because if, like, for example, like, so we just buried my dad a couple of months ago, and it, like, heartbroken, so sad. I'm worried about my brother. So if he texts me, right? I don't know he's going to survive the death of our dad. If he texts me and says, "Hey, Jode, what's up?" And I see that on my watch, my capacity to stay connected to you, although this is like, I waited for this interview all day, is significantly difficult because we're not that good. So we have exit ramps all the time. And if the hardest part is to look at each other, and we've never had this much noise, right? We've never had so many notifications and insults into our cortisol, our nervous system, that by the end of the day, the last people we want to look at is our personal husbands or our partners, or our wives, or our children. We just want to, like, what I feel like, I want to watch Dateline by myself in my bed, like watch somebody get murdered, which is like super relaxing.
Right. Why is that? Just a sidebar.
Sorry, what?
Why is that? Just a quick sidebar. Why is that so relaxing?
Because it's an escape.
Yes.
So the hardest thing we will do is look at each other. So, like, because you and I don't know each other well, it is so easy for me to sit and talk to you, right? I'm interested. I'm curious. You have questions for me. My husband is sitting in the kitchen in this moment. And so he just had a question for me about, like, what is this on the credit card statement? And what are you doing? Like, are you making supper tonight? I'm like, for fuck's sake, you know what I'd rather do? Work.
Yeah.
Because I feel so much more competent in this space. And so at the end of the day, when I would really love to talk to him or hang out with our kids, I'd rather just, I don't have much left because I've been talking to everybody all day. I've been hit with cortisol all day. And I think about this all the time, right? Like, when our dads would come home from work, nobody could get them. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Nobody could get him.
Yeah.
Like, that's why our fathers taught us that rest is synonymous with lazy. Because if you dared to rest in your 8 hours of potential productivity, it was lazy. You should use it. But now that message is still in our bones. Rest is synonymous with lazy. And people have access to us 24 hours a day. And on the weekends, when nobody could, get my father, he couldn't work on a computer. He had a day of rest on Sunday, even if he didn't go to church or not. He couldn't do anything else. And his body, his cortisol knew it. So there was a rest that we don't have. We're the first generation of parents, of teachers, of entrepreneurs who have this much noise in our heads. And that's the greatest block to creativity and productivity and innovation and, all those things. And then people often have, this question, why are we so burnt out?
We're never resting.
Exhausted.
Yeah. We're always in hyperdrive and not just the distractions, but we're locked in on our work, on our phones, on what's going on X or Facebook or Instagram, and we're not letting our body take a break, right?
No. And everything we consume there, social media isn't social at all. I mean, it's just such a misnomer. The great big four, if I were just to take them, I Googled this the other day for this company I was working with, the great four, and I just made this up, but like Uber, Meta, Amazon, Apple. Okay. So if we only take those four, they hold in this moment an $8.49 trillion market share capitalization. So the desire to keep me connected here is pretty my phone is pretty sexy. So everything I love is right there. If you were to scroll my phone, if my husband were to scroll my phone, okay, so he's a feedlot nutritionist. He's got a PhD in ruminant nutrition. Okay, so he loves cows and he loves golf. And so if I were to pick up his phone and just scroll, I wouldn't stay there long because there's bull sales and like heifer friggin' carcasses, like and if he were to get on mine, right, PWHL scores, I got women in business, I got like how women are going to change the world, and perimenopausal nutrition. Okay. So like it's designed specifically for me. So even if my kids are crying, even if I know I should get back to this project because I've got this great opportunity to write the 4th book and I have a lit agent that wants I'd really love to do it, but like, oh my God, did you see this? And then everybody else's family looks great because they all have like, they're posting pictures of them in like cream in a bush, taking family photos. And I'm like, you know what? We're not even, whatever, So it's this like vicious cycle that I don't even think we've named yet. I think we're going to be the generation that blows it apart. I think it'll likely kill many of us, but I hope our kids get it right. Because we thought smoking was good once too.
Right. So tell me, I think this is fascinating, Jody, and something that I've always looked at is what's the What's the dark timeline look like? And knowing that you've worked with inpatient, you've worked with the RCMP as a psychologist, when you've, earlier in your career or even up to this point, how does this manifest in its darkest timeline when you're looking at whether it's a young person or a big person, this level of obsessive hyper focus and disconnection? What does that evolve into, and what does that look like as you go down kind of the pathological line?
Yeah. It's so tricky because I don't think there is a one trajectory. Otherwise, we would have been able to intercept it quicker. I think some people like John Haidt, who's one of my favorite guys right now, wrote The Anxious Generation, has been one of the first to sort of stand up and say, like, we've never been this sleep deprived, and we've never been this attention fragmented. So we won't live long enough probably to get, government restrictions in place or to people to understand things. And so there needs to be this sort of understanding, I think, individually, as the need to regulate our own nervous systems. What are we doing to take control of that, even if it's just a little bit? And I often talk about dropping your shoulders, paying just attention to your neurochemistry. None of us were taught that in any way. And so we spend a lot of time doing outside of our bodies. But anything that has to do with any good work, particularly on the far end of things, the trauma end of things, all happens inside the body. Nothing happens inside the head. Right. And so I think the answer for me is, like, when I notice that people become more and more isolated, I get more and more worried. When they get more and more internally focused and lose their capacity for external focus. So what I mean is, like, I'm shitty, I'm awful, I'm screwing everything up, I'm a bad mom, I'm too fat, I'm whatever. And we start to miss then other people, right? So I often know when I am very angry at everybody else, it's a huge tell for me. If I lose my capacity to be kind, to give somebody a compliment, that's my number one tell, that I'm like, I need a break, I need rest, I am at the point. Yeah. And Freudenberger talked about this when he sort of came up with the theory of burnout. He said, the first thing you'll notice in people who get burned out is that they are emotionally exhausted. And so it doesn't mean like, we're just going through Q4, or we have to get through this season, or like we got to get through Christmas or get the report cards out or whatever the deal is. But it's like on any given Wednesday, you're just like, fuck.
Yeah. And
how often, I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I just said this in my head like 2 hours ago. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, like, it's Friday, my mom's coming tonight. Like, all of these things should be great, and I'm just not here. So when you get emotionally exhausted, the next thing that follows that is you lose compassion, which makes sense to me, right? So like, if you've ever seen a toddler miss a nap, I mean, like, they're lovely when they're fueled up, right?
Self-preservation kicks in,
right?
Yeah.
As are me. I mean, I'm a great wife when I'm regulated. I'm a wonderful mother when I'm regulated, but when I'm exhausted, I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
And so the same sort of comes true on this larger system, right? When we're emotionally exhausted, we start to lose compassion. And then the third thing is futility steps in, which really means your give a shit is broke. Like, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. That's where you start to get from
can
anxiety to depression, right?
Yeah.
Slip.
It's such a trajectory, but I mean, I can feel that in my own body, like as an entrepreneur, as somebody who is so desired to sort of, like as with your platform, really trying to figure out how we navigate people back to the best parts of themselves. You can just feel how it just happens so easily when we have so many trajectories to take us away from it that are so almost undeniable. Like, we're not that good, right? To be able to, like, I know I should have shut my phone off last night at midnight and charged it outside my phone, but like, I'm so committed to Narcos.
Yeah.
Like, I know, I need to know what Pablo Escobar is going to do.
Absolutely. And like the Wikipedia doesn't help. It just actually makes me want to see the ins and outs of the story even more. Yeah. Do the deep dive, and all of a sudden now you're addicted to the show even more. It's an accelerant. Something I even this week, busy season, end of the fiscal year, end of the school year, all those reports, all those meetings, all these events that are happening. And it was Monday night, and I said to my wife, it should be Thursday. This is how I usually feel on a Thursday. And then I have that Thursday hope. It's like, oh, just one more day till the weekend and I can actually rest. And that to me is one of those symptoms, like you talked about, those early warning signs of I put it all on the field today. And you got to do that sometimes, especially when you have passion and a vision and you're working with amazing people. But if that's happening too often, your give a shit meter drops.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, like, when you said, I'm ready, it's Thursday, I'm going to refuel on the weekend. I wish I could say that was true because I don't. And I think that's part of the issue. Like, I feel like we need to get better at sort of creating some kind of, so for example, I had a nap today, this afternoon, which was like, it feels asinine, but like, I know this weekend will not be a rest. So we're one generation out of Saturdays or Sundays being sacred, usually depending on your spiritual belief. But, when I did my residency in Nova Scotia, like in this current body, I couldn't get my groceries on Sunday. Like we are old enough to know that part, right? And now every Saturday and Sunday, I'm either on a lacrosse field or I'm in a hockey rink, trying to do the best and be the best for my children so that they can be in summer hockey and spring hockey and winter hockey and purple hockey. Mm-hmm. And I'm not refueling at a hockey rink. I'm screaming at some 13-year-old ref, trying not to get in a fight with some parent. I know this stuff, right? So then you come home from I don't know, they had a AA game in St. Albert. And so then you come home and you're just like done. Everybody's like, get your lunches, go to bed. And then we get up Monday and think, why don't we have enough in the tank to serve the people? And there's not a lot of room right now for this refueling.
How do we create, how do we start to remedy it? Obviously being aware of, here's the symptom and I need to now be intentional and proactive about shutting down and reconnecting. You talk about the 3 stops as well. And I'm curious to see how, you've done all this research and this experience, you're still experimenting on yourself to see how far you can take it by the sounds of it. But at the same time, what are the things that even in your own life you've learned to do in order to not burn out and not get to that point where you're so disconnected that you lose your way?
Yeah. I think that it's never an end game. And I think like the number one factor in all of this is grace. Like, I think that, we do a lot of beating ourselves up as parents and as partners and, leaders. I lose my way all the time. Like, people are like, how do you do it all? I don't. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm barely hanging on most days. And I've never also been more excited or more full of hope, because I think a lot of it is just really being clear that there needs to be, the insight around it is interesting because we're full in our visceral bodies, the stories of just go, 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 right? How you make it in this world is you hustle hard. You get up at 5, you pick a word of the day, you drink some kale, you smash out a workout, and all before the children get up.
Okay? We were talking about that before we started recording. Yeah.
Well, really?
Lock in, get her done. And
Yeah. That's the message, right? And so like we have so many opportunities to do that. What we don't talk a lot about, and I think that this is going to be, so critically important, is like, how often did you rest today? Like, did you do this on purpose? And so I think it's that switching of the narrative and just even being aware of that. The conversations that I'm having with men in particular about the importance of the emotional language, right? Why do we just love the chaos more than the quiet? Why do we feel safer in the chaos? And there's a reason for it, right? Because if chaos is all you knew, if unsafe starts to feel safe.
Telling the story of my life.
You can't. What's that?
You're telling the story of my life. Keep going.
But so you can't address what you don't acknowledge, right? So it's not even a matter of like, you need to be fixed. It's more a matter of like, what happened here?
Yeah.
And once you shed some light on that, you're like, okay, that makes sense. So it makes sense if it gets quiet. I think that means scary. And now that you know that, you know that when it gets quiet, you can start to have that conversation about, this is now what safety sounds like.
It's like a workaholic version of being afraid of the dark.
Exactly. And there's been legitimate experiences, I would guess, in your life and, many other people's. And so here's what's interesting. Highest rate of suicide in our province is middle-aged white men by a landslide. Not just like because they use more lethal means, not because anything. It's like 525,000 men will die this year by suicide in North America. And 88% of them, the first time they will receive flowers is at their funeral. That's something. And here's why. So people ask me this all the time. Why is this? Why white men? Why? So if you're the most privileged in our country, and I mean, I'll take anybody to task over this. And what I mean by privilege is you have the most access to resources, yes. Okay? White, straight, able-bodied, and you have a penis. Irrefutable. Okay. Now, whether you use that or, there's exceptions to every rule, people will be like, oh, yes, but yeah, okay, go be quiet. This is irrefutable. Okay. Now, that same cohort, more than any other on this globe, are killing themselves at such a faster, higher rate. Why? And I mean, I'll ask you that. Like, why do you think that is?
So I'm going to share something I heard recently, and I think you were on his podcast. He shared at a conference here in Calgary that somewhere between 40 and 60% of men who committed suicide in Canada last year had gone to a therapist within a year before it and didn't find that it helped.
Interesting. Cool. And here's why.
Yes.
So here's the interesting thing. This is what I think it comes down to, okay? Boys don't cry. You have to name it to tame it.
Yeah.
And anxiety and depression will not kill you. They're just emotions, but not talking about it might. And if I stepped into a therapist's office and I mean, there's all kinds of us, but who needed, I need somebody the capacity who would make it feel safe enough for you to feel. And most of the time, you're not going to have words for that. So I can't do the work in your head. I need to do the work in your body, which sounds like this. When you think about letting your kids down, where do you feel it in your body? When you think about that time when you're...
Right in my gut. Like,
it doesn't take you long, okay? So our work would start then in your gut. Because I could ask you all day long about what do you feel like? And you'd be like, I don't know, fuck, like shitty and like mad and like dumb, which I mean, doesn't get it. When you say, it's in my gut, and you were to say to me, like, I'm like, okay, so, and people hate this all the time. Police officers hate this all the time, which is why the vast majority of my private practice police officers, because it's like so fun for me in the nicest way.
Yeah.
But like, I would say, okay, so like, what is the shape of that feeling? And people are like, what do you mean as shape? What does it have a color? And right away, you'd be able to sort of identify for that, with me, especially if you're a visual guy or if you would have words for it or whatever, then we have an opportunity to then identify where that came from, what it's associated to, when it gets bigger, when it gets angrier, how we can let it feel safe.
The mental model, or otherwise it just gets pushed down, right?
And some of the stuff in that process, I would be, so what color is it? What shape is it? Tell me, how long has it been there? And you would probably say to me like, oh man, like since birth or since I was 3 or, whatever. And I'd be like, man, that's a long time to carry that around. And, what does it feel like if it wasn't there? And sometimes that's a big leap. So people can't even, wonder that. But what does it need? What happens if we get closer to it? What would it tell us it needs? Would it tell us to fuck off? Would it allow us to get close to it? And it's that work then that allows some of us without an emotional language to be able to just understand that there's pieces in our body. So you can imagine, right? Anytime you get close to somebody or anytime something happens, that feeling is there. And you're like, I don't know what it is, but I fucking hate it. So this has got to tell me, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. And it's just addressing that because it's that little guy in you trying to keep you safe. And it means well, but it no longer needs to do that for you.
I think, like, I'm thinking about my own experiences with this feeling, and I've gone through EMDR, lots of therapy. I do the work? It's a hobby now, to find different ways to connect with myself, so I can be better at what I do as a dad and as a leader. But I think about that shape, that color, where it is, and I also, as you're talking about when being as a child, what was that? And often when I was a crying kid, I would just have these emotional outbursts and uncontrollable crying, way too late into life, especially for a young white boy in this society where, boys don't cry. So, but it would start down there and it would creep up, 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 up until all of a sudden my eyes start to leak and I can't control my thoughts or my feelings at that point.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. And how lovely that you can sort of feel that, right? And the idea would be how much shame there was associated with that.
Yeah. Right? How do you keep it down? Well, you don't want to get ashamed. You don't want to deal with those consequences. So down it goes.
Yeah. And is there a place to let that out? And if we let that out just in the safety of a conversation where you knew nobody was going to judge you. In fact, it was safe to do it and welcome to do it. It would be interesting, to know what's in there. And I think that's the point, right? It's not hard. It doesn't take a whole bunch. It requires safety.
Yeah.
It requires a sense of like, does this feel right enough? And so sometimes I think the thing that happens a lot is that we think those things are awful. We don't want to feel like that. But they developed at one point to protect us. It developed there to keep you safe, and because it, at one point knew your emotions needed to get out of you. So it was doing the work and doing the things, and then the message of society was don't. So then that ball or whatever it is stuck down there, and it serves you well. So even now when you're on a bench, or you get in a fight with your wife and you're like, nope, there's that feeling that's staying there, we're not doing that, right? And I would just like to chat to that 9-year-old and be like, hey dude, we're different now.
Right. Getting in touch with our
Right?
past and our body at the same time, I think is super cool. And kind of back to the suicide piece. This has been something I've been chewing on. Samir was the speaker. His podcast is huge, and it's just slipping my mind. It'll come back. But what he was making this case that it wasn't that therapy wasn't effective. It was that with men especially, where they seem to have the best recovery rate, the best way to cope and heal from, suicidal ideation or attempts, is in group settings with other men around their same age, peer alignment, if you will, who've gone through similar experiences.
Shocker. Connection?
Right?
Shocker.
Yeah,
You
the
don't
softball
say.
for you.
Because how isolating would it feel if you have felt this chaos in your body your whole life and you thought you were the only one?
Versus going into a new therapist's office and you sit down and they ask you what's wrong, and it's a $300 hour.
Yeah. And they're like, why don't you journal? Maybe go for a run and drink some kale. Bullshit. So I love that. It's very true. That same data is very true in grief. So because grief is such an isolating, individual experience, what becomes helpful if you've lost a child, for example, is to sit with other people who don't have obviously the exact same experience, but you can imagine that they know the depth of that pain. And this is true quite often as you said, like in a group. I mean, oftentimes any of the AA sort of processes are all happening in group because we really want to identify that it's not lonely. Even if I can't express what it feels like for me, I can hear it, see it, feel it in other people. And, in the sort of traditional AA model, like one of the most important steps is your sponsor. If you have a good relationship with your sponsor, your level of success is significantly higher, which again comes back to this idea that I will allow my body to heal. I don't need to numb it if I feel safe enough in the presence of another human who believes in me, that I don't need to stay numb to hide my demons.
That's also why the 12th step is to now go be a sponsor. How do you keep this going? Well, you don't go back to step 1. You stick with step 12 and help other people through their steps.
Yeah. And when you're well enough to do that, right, you can imagine when you're at step 1, before step 1, you don't have the capacity to help other people. You are a good human, but all you can focus on is right here, right? Breathing, the anger, the pain, the hurt, the guilt, the remorse, the regret, right? And that allows you no access to the best parts of you, which is to give it away. And so it is such a testament to where you're at in your healing journey. And this will go back and forth. It's not a linear experience. There will be some days where you feel grounded in your own body and you can give people compliments and, wave at people and be around other addicts and, be helpful. And there'll be other days where it's like, I'm barely breathing. And that's how I know that, I'm in the deepest part of my work when I can't give it away, when I cannot show up for other people. And this is true when I lost my dad. For the first time, I had a week full of, after we lost him, I had, after we did the initial part of things, I was like, okay, I can do these talks next week. And, my team was like, abso-fucking-lutely not. And I was like, no, like, I mean, come on, and there was no way. There was no way I would have been able to do that. And even a week after his funeral, I did one, I did a talk just for women, and it was like the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was helpful because it was a small group and they knew everything. But I was like, I did not understand like how much it takes to sort of go in and how much you just simply can't give it away. Like you lose access to your words and your emotions are all over the place. And, it's not that you don't know it. It's not that you're not good at it. It's that you don't have access to it.
Fascinating, Jody. I there's so many ways directions I could go on this, but I want to kind of bring it back to, what our core, who's our audience, and who we spend a lot of time working with is with educators. So teachers, behavior mentors, school psychologists, sports coaches, and parents. And, the whole line that is really, I think, core to everything you do and everything you talk about is, if the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. In your work with education and teachers, what are you seeing out there that A, is kind of a symptom of this broader disconnection issue, but also where's the opportunity, knowing that in a school, in a classroom, they're not sitting on their screen all day, that the teachers are engaged more or less in the classroom? What are you seeing there, and what are you learning, and what are you kind of chewing on right now in terms of how we can further support the educators in the education system to be able to get ahead of this curve with the littles?
Well, great question. I mean, 95% of them in this province just voted that they would like to strike. So there is the indication that, somehow, if we ever doubted it, feeling currently unseen and unacknowledged in this moment, I think that, the data even, wider than our province would suggest that, most people in the education space within the first 5 years, 50% of people quit.
Yeah.
And so when I spoke at the United Nations this year, I was asked to speak ahead of the General Assembly on the question about the mental health crisis. What do we need to do? And I said, listen, I think it is a waste of time to invest in the people we're serving. And that feels like an asinine question or answer, I'm sorry, because most of the time, when I ask anybody in the education system, what do we need? What do you do for the kids? And, many districts or divisions have their logo as kids first, kids matter, kids. Awesome. So I'll go into a division and I'll, speak to supers or like whatever. I mean, this is like North American wide. Tell me, what do you have in place for kids? Oh, okay. We have, everybody got a Chromebook. We have zones of regulation. We have Zitra, Litra, Mitra. We have a Leader in Me program. We have da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And then I say, okay, so what do you do for your educators? Crickets. Okay. Now, sometimes they come up with things like this, like, okay, well, we have a potluck once a month. Like, holy shit. Nothing says you matter like bring your own food, And so it's this change, I think, in understanding. And so what I said at the United Nations was this: if I had the capacity, I would invest wildly in 3 groups: teachers, parents, and police officers. Because those who are most in charge of the dysregulated among us need a place to land and refuel if they're going to continue to do good work. And the people we serve are only going to get more dysregulated because they have less places to land. We have more single-parent families than ever before. We have less sibling groups. We have less access to grandparent or grandparent-like figures. And we have parents that are working harder than they've ever worked before. They are exhausted. We have mamas on smartphones all since the birth of their children, which means many of the kids will come into the school system completely and utterly dysregulated. So we cannot do the things we've always done. Expect kids to sit in desks and operate at 8:35 ready to learn. They will not. We need to incorporate some systems into regulating the nervous system of our staff first, and then our students before we get into the curriculum. Curriculum's not the problem. Yeah. But you can't learn even the finest curriculum if you're emotionally dysregulated, okay? You can't teach anything if you're emotionally dysregulated and you don't feel honored. And I think there is no holier work than that of education, because as a mother of 3, I mean, my babies will have more access to teachers in the run of a school week than they will the primary caregivers. So from a government perspective, from a longitudinal investment perspective, the wisest choice is to look after those doing the caregiving. And we haven't ever taken that approach. We're always worried about funding housing insecure people, financially insecure people, those who are struggling with addiction. Like I get, which is valiant, but you can have all those programs and nobody to run them, and it's a waste of time. So how are we paying people enough? Are we protecting their hours enough? What does our resources look like? What is it necessary to refill? So we've done a few things in that place around sort of self-care. We're like, okay, everybody have a bubble bath, and we're going to give you 4 sessions of mental health work, which is such bullshit, because we need to think about it from a perspective of like, how do you feel seen in your respective organization? And what do you need to feel that way? And there's lots of people that would tell you that. I mean, you just speak to the ATA, speak to those 95% of people who voted, and they'll tell you what they need. And then let's do the best to be able to sort of increase that worthiness. And, there's many more successful models globally, particularly in Europe, that are doing that have the finest education system. We know how to do this. We're just not doing it.
How are they doing it in Europe? If you can give me an example.
They pay teachers far more. Like it's a lauded, they see the profession as so much more important, I think, than we do. Much more sacred in terms of time off and resources. So they build the resources significantly in the staff.
Yeah.
And we know this to be true, like that model works, and we just can't justify the switch in resources because we're very good at doing things the way it's always been done.
Well, I think like our whole model of program delivery is training the trainer, training the teacher. So think about a health school teacher, health class teacher in a middle school, especially in Alberta, where I think we have among the lowest dollars per student when it comes to curriculum resources. So that teacher's having to go on Pinterest and Google and ChatGPT to hodgepodge these lessons together to hit these curriculum outcomes and bring your own banana for the banana lesson, and get through the curriculum and be the expert who has all the knowledge required. So how we would approach this is actually by just using our program as the way to teach the program, so that the teacher's not required to be the one who's the expert or the sage on the stage who's delivering all this information, knows the definition of resilience and all the pathways to connect with friends and how to be a good friend and all those things. No, they're the one who's guiding on the side, almost like they're the first among equals in the classroom. Their responsibility is not to get these kids to memorize. It's to process together in the classroom with the students, student to student, teacher to student, in a way that now in their health class, it's actually a bit of a break where they're just connecting with the students and themselves.
Can you imagine? I mean, I ask this question to my kids all the time. I said this at the BAMF conference too. Like my twins are now 12, but I said to them, who's your favorite teacher? Like I get the opportunity, guys, to speak to teachers globally. Like what do they need to know about being a student today? And so I said to Evan and Olivia, like, okay, so who's your favorite teacher? And they both agree loudly that it's Mr. Seeley. Mr. Seeley taught them in grade 3. Okay. So they're now in grade 6 and still Mr. Seeley's the guy. And I'm like, what was it about Mr. Seeley? And Evan puts up his hand because you people taught him that. And I say, what? And he said, and I was ready for some like great big insight. And he's like, he had a fish. Like, that's it. And I say to teachers everywhere, I'm like, just get a friggin' lizard and you will be teacher of the year. Like the bar is so low, right? The guy loved he still does. I mean, he's the word on the street is he's going to be available to teach grade 8. And like, I will do anything to get him and my children back to, like, I'll buy a microwave to the school. I'll support shit. Like, what do you need me to do?
Finally get him a bonus.
He single-handedly changed everything for the two of them. And I just think like, okay, so I know Chance personally, and I think that like it's not that everything is always going right for him. He loves the job and he finds some joy in the kids, and he's a funny guy, and he's ridiculous. He's dressing up and being silly and like doing all those things. And that's to me makes the most sense, because joy is the most vulnerable emotion on the planet. Mm-hmm. When I get to go into any school, I'm not looking for curriculum, or I'm not looking for like, is everybody following the rules and shit. What I'm looking for, I'm listening for how much laughter there is.
Oh,
belly laughter.
Yeah. That's real.
Yeah, you can't fake that. And if teachers are in the hallways fist bumping and like listening to shit, and like you're interacting with the principal, and they're like, oh my God, did you just hear what that kid said? That kid just said that he thinks your fallopian tubes are in your neck. Okay, we're gonna have to do an intervention before math class today, And like it's a Comedy Central, and such a gift to be in this place of education if when we forget, when we use it in that way. But like, I am so aware of how overwhelmed and exhausted educators are today. And just by telling them to be better and do better and love your job and all this stuff, it's not going to work. Acknowledging just how hard it's been in this season to be an educator, needs to be our first stop.
So question, and this is serious, but also fun. Tell me about the fish. How is this fish an example of what made this teacher so remarkable and so connected? 'Cause it's such a simple thing, but it made a profound impact.
Right. Every day they got to talk about the fish first thing.
Mm.
And that regulated their system. And, it was the common denominator in the classroom. And he also, Evan also said to me, so Livy, I can't remember who talked about the fish, but then the other guy was like, the other twin was like, and you know what else? He did once a week. He hid Tommy's agenda in the ceiling.
Huh.
Couldn't believe
Practical
it.
joke.
Oh my goodness.
So, playing practical jokes, he's hiding journals in the ceiling. Tell me about that. How is that part of the the process of connecting and how remarkable it became?
Yeah, I mean, if you and I can think about our favorite teachers,
Yeah.
if you can think about your favorite leader, anybody who has sort of mentored you, what I know more than anything is a couple of things will be in place, even if I don't know them. Okay. They will have had the capacity to regulate emotion, which means they could stay calm in times of distress. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't set a line in the sand, or stop it when people weren't safe, but they had the capacity to not lose their friggin' minds. And there was some access to joy.
Mm. Joy.
And when I think about that, when I'm building a team or a company, or when I'm, speaking with high exec leaders, we have often been taught to sort of be concerned about the hard stuff, like the P&L or the where we at this queue, like, what are all those things, those easily measurable things. Okay. The thing that's going to matter the most, which is why most companies are successful these days if they have a woman on the board or in the senior leadership team, it's irrefutable. Mostly because what we need now is somebody with an emotional language who can regulate emotion better and who has some capacity for joy. Mm. And so those two things, I think, are just sort of like the steadfast rules. And we lose our ability for emotional regulation. So generally speaking, most educators are so much better, as you and I are, in September.
Yeah.
In October. And I always say this to educators, like, do you know June comes the same time every year?
It always creeps up.
Should we not be more prepared? And, we're just skating through April, May is like, we're barely hanging on, and June we're like straight into movies. And as you should, like there's absolutely no judgment in that space. It's sort of like, I totally and utterly understand it. And why can't we do better for you? Why can't we think about the things that will keep you connected and able to stay regulated and joyful and find the goodness in things? Like, what do we need to do to incorporate that into the system as an organization, which I think it's an organizational responsibility, which we probably won't live long enough to see. So then it comes back to us. What are we doing individually? And I often say that the title of the next book, which I haven't really talked about at all yet, but is You're Not That Good. And it's a reckoning for the brilliant, the broken, and the bone tired. And it's not a criticism, it's a liberation. Your only job is to do the next best right kind thing. You can undo systemic racism. You are not good enough to undo multiple generations of abuse, neglect, and trauma. You're not that good. Stop trying. You can't take every team to the AA tier 677. You're not that good. Your job is to only do the next best right kind thing. And so when we give you that permission, what it should do, hopefully, is drop your shoulders, wiggle your toes, get your tongue off the roof of your mouth, be in this place where you're like, okay, this is all I got for today. And it's enough. And so I think it's really about getting back into that, not getting back into that, but really accessing the best parts of ourselves, which so many of us have lost access to.
Back to teachers. You talked about money, paying them what they're worth is 100%, I think should not be negotiable. That's a different topic for a different show. We might invite you on. That said, I'm thinking about the teachers we're serving, the ones who are right now trying to, do report cards and think about next year, and they're not sure if they're going to be on strike or not. So it was kind of slow to make decisions for the fall up until like, oh shit, well, we still need something to do after the strike. So now our phones are running off the hook. But what would you think about that teacher who may not have that support from their principal, from their colleagues, that might be listening? What's something they can do to bring back that connection into their own life. That's a habit that they can do daily with the kids in their classroom or with their partner or just even on their own.
Yeah, so I think it goes in sort of three stages. When we do this work, I think it's you, the individually, your family system, then your teams, and then the people you serve, in that order. That's where the sort of attention needs to live. And I think we spend a lot of time losing energy around the system sucks and nobody pays us enough and this is bullshit, right? Which is really such a symptom of burnout, because misery doesn't love company. Misery loves miserable company. And so you perpetuate that idea that this is awful. And I often say to educators, with all due respect, people are doing our work in Gaza and in Israel and in the Ukraine and Russia in this moment. Okay, we're in Canada. All right. And I want to know why you got into this business. Give me the top 3 kids you'll never forget. Give me the best teacher you ever had. And the point to that question is, I want to get you back into this place of why. How did we get here? What did we do? And what is the impact we've made this far? Who are the kids that are never going to forget us? And I say this to teachers all the time. If you can get the top 3 kids in your head, you'll never forget. The ones that you wanted to throat punch, the ones that like you thought were your swan song, maybe even the ones who died. I promise you, if you can get them in your head right now, they or their families think about you 10 times as much. It's holy work.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
And getting back into that place is often where we find the fuel to say, okay, I can only do the next best right kind thing. And the thing that kicked me in the butt the most, I think, when I left the Children's Hospital was the recognition as I walked out the door after a decade, that, again, I wasn't that good, because there were still multiple lid flips, tons of overwhelming mental health concerns, under-resourced, racial disparity, financial disparity, all of that was really evident. And I thought, oh my God, what did I do? Nothing for these 10 years. What did I do? And the issue was like, we're not that good. Like I noticed over the 10 years since I've been gone from there, 15 now, the amount of time I've heard from staff or from kids or from, things that have sort of come up, because we're in obviously a different place now. You're accessible more. People can find you. The notes that said, like, I don't know if you remember me, and that will be happening more and more in the world of education, but not till later. And so we question in that imminent phase about, what are we doing here? And the point is that we're replaceable. And I didn't think I thought I was the best psychologist the Alberta Children's Hospital had ever seen. Like, are you kidding me? I didn't know if they'd name a wing after me, but I kind of hoped like maybe a charcuterie board or something.
You still got time. Charcuterie board.
I mean? Yeah, that's true. Thank you. But, again, there was very little, because mental health doesn't stop. Neither will, the next kid with a behavioral concern, neither will the next kid with a learning disability. And so I think we really understand, like, we're not going to arrive at obliterating all of those things. We can only do the next best right kind thing.
I've been thinking about, as you've been sharing this part, is Mother Teresa quote, we can't all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. And what I'm hearing is maybe we shouldn't even think about doing those great things and really just focus on the thing in front of us, that next best right thing, versus I'm going to hit this new KPI. I'm going to change the world of education, or I'm going to take 10 teams to the playoffs. Instead,
dream big, start small.
We'll get there if we get there, but right now, big, and always here.
Yeah, have your moments, but like, doesn't that feel better in your body when I say to you, actually, you do not need to change the education system in Alberta. You're not that good, friend. What you need to do, though, is answer that next phone call. What you need to do is remind that next educator, like that had the audacity to call you, that had the bravery to wonder what your platform is all about. That's your mission. That's it. That's all I need you to do today. And it feels doable.
This is something that's helped me. This has been a thread throughout my life, my career. It's that next kid. Started first time I showed up, trying to mentor kids that were at risk, because I was that kid and I had my turnaround. One kid showed up. And since then, it's just that next kid. And it's so easy to get caught up in the big goals, the KPIs, the reports, the growth trajectory. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. But so easily that causes the frustration, the anxiety, and the toxic cultures that can emerge from it. But what we always like to do as an organization, as a team, is come back to that next kid. We had an event last night. Instead of me being the MC or having some celebrity be the MC, we had one of our alumni. Why? Well, because
Cool.
that's what I want everyone who thinks about our work and what we do to not be thinking about, oh, we're going to take over the world and we're going to change education, but how can I, in my chair as a donor or a supporter or a teacher, use this for that next kid to bring out the best in them?
Yep. Love it.
So you said we're not going to live long enough to fix this. I'm not going to challenge you on that because this is big, and the world has
Mm-hmm.
changed, and I don't think we're going back.
Mm-hmm.
So, what in all of this gives you hope about the next generation then? Like, are there things that are happening now that you're seeing now that are taking hold that the next generation will be better off in this way than we are?
Mm-hmm. And I've never been so grateful to be alive. And I'll tell you why, mostly because the bar's never been this low.
I like, yeah, aim low and then you can always overachieve.
It's never been this easy to do great things. And I think that you want to be a favorite teacher, you want to be the best parent or the, important community member. It really comes back to the idea of kindness. And it's free and we can do it all the time. And people say, is that really it? Yeah. The number one thing I talk about in feeling seen is really like when you're acknowledged, you rise. When you acknowledge genuinely another human being, it is a gift. And it's not only life changing, it can be life saving. And so I think that when I look at my kids and their understanding of inclusion, their understanding of, being open-minded to things and have innovation and creativity, all of those things are there. And I just hope that there's enough big people in their world, right? That they get the right teacher every now and then, the right hockey coach every now and then to, because their dad and I will do the best in our village, but, as parents, we're not that good. And so I hope that, they have enough of those experiences to sort of understand that they can change the world. And that's all we need, right? One kid at a time. So my job isn't to globally influence that. Someday, I mean, maybe I might, but the idea is all I got is in front of me right now. My three that are here and everybody else that I get, the privilege to be in front of.
Amazing. Amazing. Jody, it's been an hour and it feels like we just started. I definitely will be trying to have you back on this show and tell people where they can learn, where they can keep this conversation. I've been listening to a few of the podcasts that you've been guests on to really get an understanding and feel for everything that you do. And your books are on Audible, which makes it easy to not just like listen to, but your conversational style, I feel, is just a natural fit for an audio conversation that you're having in the gym or on a car ride. Tell people where they can find you, what your latest book is, and maybe a little bit more about this next one, You're Not That Great.
Hmm. So yes, everything we're online. drjodycarrington.com and Unlonely is my podcast. But the next book, I don't know, man. You're Not That Good, and we are just in the. I'm in the pitching phase in this moment. So we have a U.S. literary agent. We have lots of interest, and I just got to get it right.
Yeah.
So it's I hope that this thing comes together in 2027. Yeah.
Sounds like it's focused on helping us let go of some of those far off expectations and focus on where we are and who we're with.
Yeah, that's
which is the heart of everything we've just talked about. And look forward to reading the upcoming book, listening to it because I'm busy. But encourage everybody to check out Jody's work and a fountain of knowledge on so many topics, and has some of the world's leading experts in education, psychology, even some nutritionists, I think, on her show that are all here to help the same thing. And it's that loneliness epidemic, and the symptom is mental health. And if we can flip loneliness into connectedness, well, we're still going to have a symptom of mental health, but it'll be positive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jody.
Thank you for having me.